Welcome to Annapolis Mosaics. Our program spotlights people in our community who are involved in activities designed to promote good human relations. I am Michael Keller, the chair of the Annapolis Human Relations Commission and your host. The commission is a city board that seeks to promote equal opportunity and to eliminate discrimination. My guests today are Coley and Grant Young, who are local organizers for Citizens Climate Education. Coley and Grant, welcome to Annapolis Mosaics.
Thank you very much for having us.
Well, let's start by talking about the mission of Citizens Climate Education and how it differs from the many other organizations that are working on this specific issue.
Okay, I guess I'll start. So Citizens Climate Education is all about empowering people.
Okay.
People like you and me who are constituents of some elected official to educate our elected officials. So we do grassroots education and grass tops outreach as well. So we're reaching out to those people in our communities with influence to show them that there are people in their communities who are advocating for climate change solutions.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Could you tell our viewers about the Citizens Climate Education story? Specifically, how and when did it get started, and how did it develop?
So it was founded in 2007 by a realtor named Marshall Saunders.
Okay.
He was working with an organization called Results on eliminating poverty around the world. And he got really discouraged when he realized that the effects of climate change would basically reverse all of the efforts to eliminate poverty. Mm-hmm. So he founded Citizens Climate Education and Citizens Climate Lobby, two sister organizations. Citizens Climate Education is a 501c3 and Citizens Climate Lobby a 501c4, so two different nonprofits. And he really used the model of Results in organizing citizens to lobby their elected officials for solutions.
Mm-hmm. Well, because you said your organization's been here since 2007. Mm-hmm. So you're talking about a 10-year period. Has your organization grown during that time in terms of number of registered supporters?
The organization has had tremendous growth, actually. Just in the past year, the number of chapters has doubled from 228 to 308 chapters nationally. The organization itself began at a grassroots level and grew into a grass tops level, as Coley said. It really is an international effort now, with numerous thousands of local groups around the world doing the same work that we are here in Annapolis.
Mm-hmm. Citizens Climate Education, as you pointed out in your opening statement about mission, gives concerned individuals the tools that they need to lead informed, respectful education and training sessions. And I'm going to talk about a number of these tools that are that you offer based on information that you've advertised on your website, and give you a chance to share a little bit about each one of them with our viewers. And the first one is something called Moving Past Misconception. What's that about?
So the name that we use in our conferences is Move Over Misconception. And it's a fun communication training that helps us to be respectful and understanding of people who think differently from ourselves. We always work from a place of respect and gratitude and appreciation, no matter how differently our elected officials may think from us. Mm-hmm. And not just our elected officials, but each other. Mm-hmm. We're a nonpartisan organization, so we welcome people from all political stripes mm-hmm. and all walks of life. Mm-hmm. And that can be challenging for those of us who kind of live in a bubble of people who think similarly to us. Mm-hmm. So Move Over Misconception helps us to really empathize with people from different points of view.
Also, I think it's important to remember that it can feel daunting to to even consider talking to an elected official, but we're just people sitting in different seats. So it's important to remind each other of that. And that's part of our training.
And how about laser talks? That's something else that you have. What's a laser talk all about?
Laser talks they're resources on the website that you can use, you and I and anyone can use to learn a little bit about the key points for citizens' climate education and the talking points that we need to bring to those elected officials and each other.
And then you've got Citizens Climate University.
Yeah, so Citizens Climate University is in our online portal called Community. We just call it Community. Anyone can register for it. It's at community.citizensclimatelobby.org. And once you're registered, you have access to this enormous treasure trove of webinars, videos, articles. All of them have resources to help you become more informed so that you can have better conversations.
Okay. All right. And then there's Group Start Training.
So the Group Start Training is the way that we start a new chapter, and it's basically an orientation for all new volunteers. So we offer the Group Start Training in person at our regional and national conferences, as well as our fall lobby days, and each of those things happen annually. So we have our annual international conference in June every year, our lobby day in November every year, and our regional conferences happen around February and March every year.
And then you've got something called a REMI report, R-E-M-I.
Yes.
What's that about?
So it's pronounced REMI.
REMI, okay.
REMI stands for Regional Economic Models, Inc. It's an organization that is hired often by oil companies and governments, state and local governments around the country have hired this organization to do economic models.
Okay.
Now, I don't have a background in economics, so I have not read the 168-page report myself, but they do offer brief summaries for each region that talk about what our proposal, which is a climate change solution proposal, what it would look like for each part of the country in terms of job loss or gain, lives saved due to reduced pollution. What would the impact be locally, and what would it really mean for people?
And it's important for both constituents, individual citizens, and organizations from both sides of the fence and from different sectors to have a nonprofit organization or a nonpartisan organization like REMI to put out numbers that we can all look at impartially.
One really impressive thing about the REMI report is that the senior economist author of this report does not believe in climate change, or he does not believe it's caused by humans. And he was asked to run economic models for how this proposed policy for a climate change solution would impact the economy. And during his final presentation on video to the people who paid for the study, he said, I don't believe in climate change, but this policy is a good economic stimulus package with the side effect of reducing carbon emissions.
It's a nice side effect.
It's a very nice side effect. So one lovely thing about this study is that we don't actually have to convince people that climate change is human caused. We only have to convince them that they will benefit from the policy.
You had mentioned earlier that you're a bipartisan organization. Yet if you look at polls which have been done on this on the whole issue of climate change in terms of people's positions on the issue, you'll find it does break down very much on partisan grounds. You've got a substantial majority of Republicans who are, let's call them skeptics. They're not really sure that it's really there, and for a lot of them, they don't want to be sure about it because they tend to be anti-regulation, and to govern and to deal with climate change, you're going to have more government activities, more government regulations. So for a lot of them, it's it's ideological in basis. On the other hand, among Democrats, you have a very different view. Democrats tend to be more comfortable with government intervention and activities, and therefore, they look at the science and they're not put off by ideological reasons in terms of or any problems with the science as presented. How do you bridge that kind of a gap? You're not talking about it just in terms of elected officials. You're talking about it in terms of the electorate and in terms of the population. You've got a real split between those two camps. I hear what you're saying in terms of how you're going about this, but I would be interested in, I think our viewers would be interested in hearing about how you actually do that. How do you bring in both Republicans and Democrats to talk civilly about this issue and to dialogue on it and perhaps come to some kind of mutual understanding, if not complete agreement. In other words, how do you make bipartisanship work in a short way?
In a short, easy, quick way.
No. I that's me. In other words, I just asked. I took a very long, drawn-out question, and I will shorten it. And the shortened part of it is, how do you make bipartisanship work?
Bipartisanship, I think, has always been an inherent challenge to any issue that affects more than a couple of people, in this case, everyone in America. Recently, there has been a lot of bipartisan action led by conservative elder statesmen, luminaries. It's called the Climate Leadership Council, and they've put forward a carbon fee and dividend proposal that would essentially benefit over 70% of Americans like you and me. That's over 220 million Americans. And it puts that money directly back into household hands, into your hands and mine, and that serves as an economic stimulus that really benefits most, if not most Americans. In order to do that, we have to Democrats and Republicans have to continue to have the conversation that the Climate Leadership Council is really proposing. If we can get this passed in Congress, it's an easy sell because economic benefit can often be the bridge between the huge gaps that we see between the Democrats and Republicans.
Okay, yeah, and indeed, your preferred solution is a national carbon tax and dividend system. Mm-hmm. Could you relate to our viewers exactly how that would work? Because some folks may say, well, what's a carbon tax? That doesn't sound too bad. Tax, I don't like that idea. But how would that actually work? How would you implement that? And what would people see happening if Congress enacted a carbon tax and dividend system for the whole country? What would happen?
Well, for the consumer, not much other than, or what I should say as a citizen, is not much other than receiving a dividend check every month, whether that's literally a check or a direct deposit. For businesses, and that's one main difference here, is it's not a tax on citizens. The dividend is received by citizens. Businesses that work or use fossil fuels pay for a certain amount per ton, which increases slightly every year. So in that way, citizens really don't have any impact themselves other than having more money in their pockets. So it's a simple solution in that way.
And I'll just elaborate on the policy itself.
Okay.
So the carbon fee and dividend, it's basically 3 steps. So the first step is to place a fee on all fossil fuels at the source where they enter the economy. So that would either be the coal mine, the oil, or the fracking well.
The wellhead, basically.
Or the port,
Okay.
where they're entering the country. And then all of that money, all of those fees would go into a trust fund. So it would not grow government at all. And after administrative costs are paid, which would be anywhere between 1% and 4%, depending on which year of implementation, then that revenue all gets returned to households equally, as Grant said, as a monthly dividend check or direct deposit. probably using an existing system that returns money to citizens, like either the IRS or the Social Security Administration. And then the last part is a border adjustment. So if we're importing or exporting any fossil fuels or products made with fossil fuels, there would be some kind of adjustment so that it doesn't penalize American businesses for exports.
Okay.
And the border adjustment, I'm sorry, would also incentivize other countries to follow suit and implement their own carbon fee or carbon tax.
Yeah, going back to your conversation about building bipartisan support for this, how does your new endorser project fit into that?
So remember I used the word grass tops?
Right.
The endorser project is essentially the grass tops outreach.
Okay.
So we have volunteers who take on the job of going and talking to people of influence in their communities, whether that's faith leaders, local elected officials like mayors and city councils, could be local employers, business leaders. And they go and they lobby essentially these local leaders and ask them for their endorsement. And we have two types of endorsement. One is a general, please Congress, solve climate change. And the second one is more specifically endorsing our policy proposal of carbon fee and dividend.
Okay. All right, we're going to take a break now, but when we return, I'll be talking with Coley and Grant Young about more information related to their organization. I'm talking today with Coley and Grant Young, local leaders in citizens climate education. Well, let's talk a little bit about how your organization seeks to influence the public via the media. To what extent do you use the various elements of the media, everything from traditional media, the newspapers, all the way to social media to advance your agenda and your cause?
We use the media quite a bit, and we use every aspect of it. As a millennial, I was very surprised at the amount of attention we put on traditional newspapers, letters to the editor, and opinion articles. And I asked the question during my first training, why would you focus on newspapers? They're so outdated. But I learned that congressional staffers in D.C. have a job of looking at their local papers and seeing what local citizens are talking about in those editorial pages. So it's actually a very good way for citizens to influence, without going to D.C., and influence our officials in D.C.
Yeah, in fact, I can remember one case on a completely different issue where I wrote a letter to the editor, and the congresswoman personally called me to say that she would like to run it in her newsletter. The congresswoman wasn't a staff person.
Wow.
So I remember
Thank you for that, yeah.
that happened one time. So they do, you're absolutely right. People do read the letters to the editors. Next to the cartoon, it's the most frequently read item on an editorial page.
Interesting. So those staffers, those millennial staffers, are tasked to read the newspaper. Painful task, but it's something
I found
we have
it's
to do.
much more interesting than I thought it would be.
Well, it's good for us tactile learners too. So we do use the newspaper, and also in terms of getting the word out, we put out everything from flyers, fold-outs, and pamphlets. We leave them everywhere from the library to local businesses that are willing to share the message as well. In terms of online media, we use a good amount of rich media too. A lot of online event invitations, email and news groups and forum posts as well. So we try to stay out there as much as we can, including requests and solicitations for more volunteers that are willing to help.
And we also use Twitter. And even though I'm a millennial, I never used Twitter before I joined this organization. But just like there are staffers who are required to read the letters to the editor, there are also staffers who are required to read the Twitter accounts and see who's tweeting their member of Congress. So we have initiatives like this where if you want Congress to lead on climate, then tweet your support. Tweet directly to your member of Congress, even to those representatives who are not your own, but tweet your appreciation for their leadership.
Does CCE work in partnership or coalition with other climate-oriented groups, and if so, which ones?
So we have a few organizations that we partner with in a public way. Some of those are the Pachamama Alliance, the Niskanen Center. There may be a couple of others that aren't at the top of my mind right now. But we also partner behind the scenes. Because we're a nonpartisan organization, we try our best not to partner with very partisan organizations. So there are a lot of organizations out there that are focused on climate, but that tend to be more partisan. And so while our members may support those organizations, we don't have public partnerships with them.
Okay, your organization's been around, as we mentioned, about 10 years now. If you were asked to identify what you consider your biggest accomplishment, what would you identify as that?
So I think that the Bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus is the same thing I just held up. We're up to 24 members of this caucus in the House of Representatives. And the neat thing about this caucus is that it's a Noah's Ark style caucus where you have to join in a bipartisan pair.
Okay.
So there's many Democrats ready to join, but they have to go out and find their own Republican. It's a BYOR party.
You do have a sister organization, and that is the Citizens Climate Lobby, which you made reference to before. Your organization, CCE, is a 501c3. The lobby is a C4. What exactly does the lobby do, and how do the two complement each other?
CCL, or Citizens Climate Lobby, complements CCE, Citizens Climate Education, by educating and supporting and empowering people like you and me to reach out to their local elected officials, either through tweeting them, writing letters, making calls to their staff, or going to what we have Coley referred to as a lobby day, annual lobby days in November. Excuse me. So that's what CCL does in terms of sister action. We also have one thing that I've gone through, and anyone who would like to lobby their elected official is lobby training. And that helps you just be prepared to work in teams to pitch your local elected officials. And it's actually much more fun than it sounds like it would be. It's great to be engaged, so we invite you to do that.
I'd like to go back to our conversation about the carbon tax and dividend system, because I do know that quite a number of conservatives have have basically embraced that position. In fact, I can remember there was an article in Forbes magazine, of all places, a very conservative business magazine, in which I think it was one of their folks, may have been Steve Forbes, who said, if we go that kind of route, I'd rather certainly give a higher credence to a carbon tax than a cap and trade with all the regulations and details associated with it. And I know that you've got the listing right here. I'd just like to take a look at this, because you've got some names on here that you normally would not consider connected with so-called liberal positions. You've got James A. Baker, former Secretary of State. You've got Henry Paulson, who was Secretary of Treasury, I believe, under President George W. Bush. You've got George Shultz, who has served in a number of different Republican administrations. So it seems to me that you've got you've got allies on the political right that are backing your cause. Do you like to say anything about that?
Sure. Well, I'll first point out that George Schultz is on the board, the advisory board for
Okay.
Citizens Climate Lobby
Okay.
and Citizens Climate Education.
Right.
So we're very proud of this group of conservatives for stepping forward
Yeah.
with their conservative case, because we're hopeful that the solution will come from the conservative side, since that's who currently has power in the government.
And has traditionally shown resistance to any type of climate legislation. One thing you mentioned earlier in the show is regulation and government growing and exploding. One thing that really benefits us and government in this way is it doesn't increase spending at all. You don't have to grow government in order for this to happen. And I think that's one of the huge differences with cap and trade versus something like this, where you're using build systems to get money back into citizen hands, and you're not growing government while finding a solution.
Yeah, Republicans really like the market signal, the market-based solution, and that's what this is. Both, this group of conservatives that we just talked about, as well as the Citizens Climate Education approach, they're very similar in what Grant just said, that they don't grow government. They basically reduce the need for regulations on a lot of fronts. So regardless of whether, what happens with the EPA in terms of, rollbacks or reductions in regulations, if we implement this type of carbon tax system, those regulations will become unnecessary because it will actually accelerate us so far below the current emissions. In fact, according to the REMI report, we would get to below 50% of the 1990 carbon emissions levels by 2035.
I'm sure that many of our viewers are going to want to know more about your organization. How can they get in touch with you? What's your website so they can review that? Do you have a telephone number you'd like to share?
I'll share our email address.
Or email, that's fine too.
Annapolis@citizensclimate.org. And if you want to see our website,
It is citizensclimateeducation.org.
Thank you for viewing our program, and please join us again on Annapolis Mosaics. If you would like more information about the Annapolis Human Relations Commission, please jot down the information on your screen. You can reach us at 410-263-7998 or by email at hrcommission@annapolis.gov, or check out our page at the City of Annapolis website. Go to www.annapolis.gov, click on Government, then Boards and Commissions, and scroll down to the Human Relations Commission page. And always remember the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "We have flown the air like birds and swum the seas like fishes, but have yet to learn the simple act of walking the earth as brothers